Dr. Hovind, I love your doctoral thesis. I've torn it to pieces with house and gaffle. I can't remember when I last pissed myself laughing. It's a good thing the thesis mopped the piss off the floor.
Welcome to part 27 of this read-through and peer review of Kent Hovind's doctoral dissertation, which was published on wikileaks.org on December the 9th, 2009. If you have not yet seen the previous installments in this series, then I recommend that you go back and see those first, as in this episode I will start off exactly where I left off in the last. In the last episode, Kent told us all about Haeckel's embryos and how they were discredited, and how they are still used today to justify abortion. Kent continues about Haeckel's embryos in this episode too. Haeckel was an advocate of Lemark's theory that acquired characteristics could be inherited. Yes, Kent, and I'm an advocate of correct grammar. He invented all sorts of sketches or fabricated pictures that showed the different embryos of animals, including man, and how they were so similar. He later confessed that these were lies. Well, that isn't technically correct, is it, Kent? Actually, he wasn't entirely far off the mark. It's just his drawings were somewhat caricatures of reality. In the early developmental stages of vertebrate embryos, they are actually staggeringly similar. What Ernst Haeckel actually admitted to was embellishing the truth a little, principally by leaving the yolk sac off the illustrations that he provided of the embryos in question. But we'll go into more detail on that in a short while. Kent continues. These sketches were reproduced and are still displayed in some textbooks. Yes, Kent, they are, and in fact, they're not necessarily displayed as Ernst Haeckel's original sketches, but in most modern textbooks they're actually displayed as photographs of the actual embryos. You see, while Ernst Haeckel originally used his drawings to back up his theory of recapitulation, they are also excellent evidence for developmental evolution. It is for this reason that they are still shown in textbooks, and not to promote Haeckel's recapitulation theory. You see, I think I can see what the problem is here, Kent. While you're reading those high school science books, you're actually really just looking at the pictures, aren't you, Kent? Anyway, Kent continues. Haeckel became one of Germany's ideologists for racism, nationalism, and imperialism. Yes, Kent, the man may have had, by what is considered by today's standards, somewhat unfavourable political views. However, let's be honest, he died about 2 months after the end of the First World War. He had no direct hand in the events that occurred 20 years after his death. I know where you're going with this, Kent, and your next sentence bears this out clearly. Probably more than any other man, Haeckel is responsible for the influence on a young man who was to come later and radically change the world. Adolf Hitler. Ah, yes, Kent. That is commonly known as Godwin's law. Those not familiar with Godwin's law, it goes something along the lines of this. In any discussion or argument that goes on long enough, the invocation of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis becomes absolutely inevitable. But we continue. In reading Haeckel's ideas and experiments, Hitler decided that the strongest race was the one that was to survive. His imperialism led to his belief that the Germans were to take over the world. Yes, Kent. It is, however, unfortunate that history and experts in this particular historical era see this somewhat differently. But we continue. Much harm has come to the world by this man, Ernest Haeckel. Okay, Kent, if you say so. But let me just point out, it is somewhat evident that you didn't do a great deal of research into what you've just pointed out in the last paragraph. For a start, you've consistently spelt the guy's name wrong. It isn't Ernest, it's Ernst. There's only one E in his first name. But anyway, in the mid-1850s, there was a revival of the Buddhist cult. It was co-founded by Colonel H.S. Olcott. The goal of this was to unify the Buddhist. The name of this revival was Theosophy. Are you sure about that statement, Kent? Henry Steele Olcott would have only have been 18 in 1850. Another one of the founding members of the Theosophical Society wasn't actually born until 1851. The Theosophical Society was actually founded in 1875. That's sloppy research, Kent. Very, very sloppy research. But Kent continues. The Theosophical cult was also founded by Madame Helena Blavatsky. The second statement in their platform of doctrinal belief says, the universe was evolved, not created, and it functions according to law. Actually, Kent, I think you're getting Theosophy and Buddhism a little mixed up. The second statement that you refer to is actually the second statement of fundamental Buddhist belief. Theosophy, on the other hand, holds that all religions are attempts by the spiritual hierarchy to help humanity in evolving to greater perfection, and that each religion therefore has a portion of the truth. But anyway, Kent comments, we are seeing a great revival of the New Age cult today. Yes, Kent, we're seeing a great revival of many things. In fact, in the UK, there's even a Jedi temple. But anyway, Kent shifts target. Sigmund Freud is the next man in the great influence for evolution and against biblical Christianity. He was born in 1856 and died in 1939. He was an ardent follower of Darwin. In 1915, he was convinced that Darwin's and Lamarck's theories were right. As opposed to believing that an imaginary friend did it all. Yes, Kent. As a psychologist, Freud was very familiar with the concept of imaginary friends, and I'm quite sure that in all cases, wherever he came across imaginary friends, those friends were, in fact, imaginary. But Kent continues. He believed that acquired traits could be inherited. He thought that mental disorders were simply leftover behaviors that had been appropriate in early stages of evolution. Yes, Kent. And in many cases he's absolutely correct. However, granted, there were some flaws in his theories. The work that Freud pioneered is over 100 years old now. Modern advances in the field of psychology have built on Freud's pioneering work. However, Freud's work remains important in the history of clinical psychodynamic approaches, even to this day.